25 seconds till we're live for the other audiences. Rantsofizzo.com here on Spreely Media. Guys, it's Monday. We're going live in 2 minutes. Yeah, 2 minutes, 25 seconds. So sit tight for a second, kids. Got Dave Champion sitting with us today. It's always a great damn show. All right, kids, if you're watching on the Spreely app, you're like, well, what is that? How do I go to Spreely.com. You want to figure out how to get paid to watch the show? Go to Spreely.com. There's an affiliate link that'll get you into an account on Ad RevShare. You can create an account, and every time you share the show link or an article link for any of our shows, you can get paid. Just ask Sarah, our intern producer. You want a social media where you actually can say whatever the hell you want and you don't get fucking dinged for it? Spreely.com. Literally, Chelsea gets your emails if you complain about somebody, especially if you complain about me. She'll get it and she'll laugh. We'll laugh in the backgrounds. Spreely is also the only social media site where if you got a problem, unlike calling Zuckerberg, which is not an option, you can call the CEO and he'll answer. All right, less than 1 minute, kids. Rants of Izzo show here on Spreely Media. Don't forget, you guys want to join the chat, rantsofizzo.com. You can join, chat, watch, take a look at you guys. We're utilizing that again. So we're going to be behaved. We're going to do that more. Good to see you, April Schoen. Bev, how are you?
Sit down, shut up, and pay attention.
Damn!
This is the Rants of Izzo Show with your host, Dominick Izzo. From porn to politics. We touch every third rail we can find. You might want to put your headphones on so your mom can't hear this. It's been called the most entertaining 60 minutes on the internet, and it starts now. Let's do this.
Hi, happy Monday, guys. Rants of Izzo show here on Spreely Media. It is Monday the 12th, day after the Super Bowl. Didn't watch it, don't care. I like to think that as a person of my word, I say all the time, well, personally, I'm not going to watch it because I didn't like the knee thing. I'm kind of patriotic, and I'm not one of those guys who said, hey, enough time has gone by, so I'm going to wind up hoping that the public forgets that my actions and words don't have to be congruent and integrity isn't everything. So I stuck by my word. My guest today, I couple different things about this man. If you're listening, great. If you're watching, you already know who he is, Dave Champion. He's been on several times in the past. It's been way too long since I've had him on. A couple things about Dave Champion. One of the few men that I will never argue with. It's just not going to happen. I respect Dave so damn much. He is one of the few guys in a handful of men out there that actually has caused me to reevaluate very solid positions that I've taken, including like supporting Trump or my position on law enforcement, you name it. Dave is I'm going to let him kind of give his background, but Dave is somebody you listen to. We have guys like this on the show, like Matty Wack, John Burke. There's certain men out there that really you should listen to because they're so well-versed in their craft and they're beyond educated. Dave, welcome back, man. It's been years. How the hell are you?
Thank you, buddy. I'm doing absolutely spectacular. How have you been?
I can't complain. Just the same old different day. We live in a world where that's all we do. Online, social media, complaining. I won't say that's funny. I'm not going to say that's how you got your start, but that is kind of you're one of the first guys out there in the social media world. You had a huge following because you told it like it was, and people weren't used to you. you came on the scene. You started just really ranting, and that was what, 6-7 years ago. People started looking, holy shit, and can we get the 360-degree view of who Dave Champion is? Because I really want to start there and then go into today's topic.
Okay, if we go up to the 35,000-foot level without specifics, Dave Champion is somebody who believes in facts, data, and evidence, and that personal liberty above all else. And oftentimes in our modern society, all those elements don't go together. They do for me. I'm a former Army Ranger. I'm a former law enforcement officer from Southern California. I worked as a constitutional law advisor. I spent 15 years as a consultant for federal and state regulatory matters. I've written a book on human physiology, and today we're going to be talking a little bit about income tax. So I wrote the best-selling book in the nation, Income Tax: Shattering the Myths, which tells the American people the truth about who Congress has imposed the income tax on and who Congress has not imposed it on.
I want to kind of point out, you and I ran for office as sheriff at the same time back in 2018. And what we experienced firsthand was some of the real vile aspects of law enforcement, or not just law enforcement, excuse me, was the system. Right, I ran out here in Cook County. You ran out in Arizona, Nye County. You were completely targeted. You told it just also shows how stupid some of the American public is, how you brought to them the issues that was in the county, in the nation, and they still voted for the moron who was in office. Talk about that a little bit, about what was, I mean, guys like you don't have to run for office. You served, you're a civil servant. You've done more to wind up waking people up. What was the calling back then for why you decided, man, I'm going to put a big target on my chest and back and go right into the lion's den and actually run for office, and one of the highest office in the county? Why did you make that decision back then when you knew damn well the system sucks?
When I moved to Pahrump, Nevada, in Nye County back in 2008, I did not know how corrupt the government was. And over a decade, I learned more and more and more and more. And I had a local television show here for 6 years, and I did a 15-minute segment about every other week on corruption in the sheriff's department. And then, at some point, Dom, how this works. You can only talk so much, and at some point, you've got to actually stand up. And so I decided in 2018 I was going to do that. If I was going to condemn publicly the corruption in the Nye County Sheriff's Department, the larger government, but most specifically, I was targeting the Sheriff's Department in terms of what I would talk about on the air, because I find that the most egregious. I ran for sheriff, and education of a lifetime. I encourage everybody, if they have not run for office, to do it. You will find out more about your fellow citizens in a handful of months as you lead up to the election than you will have learned in your entire life prior to that. It was truly an astounding experience. The people of Nye County decided they wanted the woman who was arguably the most corrupt sheriff in the history of Nye County. They wanted to put her back into office rather than putting me in office, which is certainly their prerogative. They went ahead and did that. The gentleman who pretty much kept her in office because she was a knucklehead. She would not have been able to run an agency. His name is Dave Berukowitz, and he eventually had the rank of captain. And about 4 months ago, he was indicted on multiple felonies by the feds, and now he's talking to them and cutting deals so that he doesn't have to do many, 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 many years, maybe perhaps the rest of his life in prison. And he and Sharon, as far as corruption, Sharon being the former sheriff, were two peas in a pod, but she had pancreatic cancer. She's since passed away. So the feds are taking out their wrath now on him. But that goes to show, despite the fact that I did years of segments on the corruption in the Nye County Sheriff's Department on a local television show, the voters of Nye County said, yeah, that corrupt person, we don't want someone who's going to clean things up. We want the really corrupt person. So that they got, what do they say in a democracy? You get the government that you deserve. Yeah.
It blows me away too, with your background of serving as a police officer. You were one too, that, at the time was very unheard of, calling out the profession you did and exposing some things in there. What was it like when you ran with your quote unquote brother in blue, or your brothers in blue, brothers and sisters in blue, or the supporters? I have to imagine you took a hit, because I took an insane hit from active cops and retired cops who just could not understand that I wouldn't fall in line and lick the boot. That's something you just never did. You're very vocal about it from day one. You were vocal about it during the pandemic and whatnot. What's your experience been like? Because what you just said, when somebody decides to run for office, they get to really see who the true voter is and whatnot, but they really get to see who, their air quotes friends and associates are. Did you have any backstabbing, backlash, anything from people that you were just blown away that just no longer arbitrarily supported you because you were challenging the system in which you were a part of?
I wouldn't say I had any backstabbing, because people who know me, whether they know me very well or even perhaps superficially around town, but they've had an opportunity to get to know me, they supported me 100%. But it was the people who opposed me were people who did not know me, had no relationship with me. And one of the reasons I told your audience that run for office if you haven't, I learned so many things about my past that had never happened.
Oh, yeah.
It was astounding. And then in November of 2018, I lost the primary, and two other candidates, including the corrupt sheriff, they moved on to the general election. That was in November of 2018. On January 5th, 2019, the sheriff's department then took out its retribution on me for presuming to run against her and for all those years of doing shows about her corruption and the corruption of the people who work for her by arresting me on a bunch of trumped up charges. And the DA took one look at it. He's like, no, we're not doing this. But in the internet age, it got splashed everywhere. And for years, when I would do things online, social media influencing and things, somebody would put a link up to the NCSO story where they had arrested me. And, oh, this is the guy you're listening to. He was arrested, which was exactly what their goal was.
Yep, and it blows me away how we're in a day and age where people are so stupid. They do not do research themselves. I can't stand it when people even, like, I'm not a liberal. There's a lot of shit that I condemn for them. Somebody posted something that Obama, who I'm not a fan of, said completely out of context as if it was exactly what he said. And I said, hey, can we get the rest of this clip? Because I'm not a supporter of him, but I'm smart enough to do the research to know that he didn't say this within the context you're posting this. Yeah, did you learn, like I learned that during my time running for office, I had a cocaine problem and I frequented gay bars. Yeah, I learned that one. That was new. And I was like, that was really great. Oh,
so they outed you, huh?
Oh, yeah. It's like, hey, get some pictures because I probably was, dancing some great damn moves there. Dave, I kind of want to take the first path I want to go today is I want to go taxes. And I wanted you, I blew the opportunity to get you on last year this time, so I wasn't about to miss it. I want to talk about taxes because here's what we have, and this is what sparked this. Several blue check, millions of followers, social media guys are doing the whole, I'm never paying taxes again because of whatever they see our government doing. And I'm kind of tired of that shit where I posted screenshots, said, hey, all right, April's coming up. Are you going to do this or not? So in a very general I'm ignorant. I don't have your book. I haven't read it yet. And my co-host on Friday has your book. She brought it up and I went, shit, I got to have Dave on. I want to know.
I didn't know you don't have a copy. Yeah. I'll get one in the mail to you this week. I apologize. I didn't know that. Oh,
I should have bought it. I should have absolutely supported you. Dave, here's why. Because I'm your typical American who's so focused on everything else in my life, right? Building businesses, working on my family, keeping myself healthy, all this stuff. When it comes to taxes, I'm a good step and fetch boy. April 15th this year, got to file them, do this, do that. I want to talk about, like, if you can give us a brief history of why we even pay taxes in the first place, and then what are the repercussions for, can we not pay our taxes? And would that even be an option? Could Americans come together and fight against the government and say, nope, no more, we're standing in solidarity, we're not paying, we're not filing, we're not anything? I want to have just a general conversation because I have a feeling this could turn into a month-long education from you, but can we just start there with, what's the idea behind why we pay taxes? And let's go into what happens if we don't.
Okay. So let me just start with this statement. We don't need to stand up and have some sort of a civil disobedience, any sort of actions, quote, against the government, because the law is on our side. And I don't mean a little, I mean 100%. As an example, I have not filed a tax return or paid income tax in 30 years. I wrote the best-selling book in America on it. I do shows like this all the time. I'm vocal coast to coast. And here I sit because the law is very clear about what it says. And the government has admitted it has a copy of my book. So if it thought that it could file criminal charges against me or even civil charges, it would, and it never has, because the law is very clear. Now, to your question, why do we pay tax? Well, of course, taxes fund government and have since, before there was the very first government had taxes. However, income tax specifically, most people are unaware. Prior to 1913, when they passed the very first modern Income Tax Act, the government's income, this revenue, was almost exclusively from alcohol tax. And the government had more than enough money because America was a drinking country back then. I mean, everybody was sloshed all the time. And so the federal government made a ton of money. However, as we know, eventually there was a large community of people in the United States who wanted to stop Americans from having access to alcohol. They wanted to invoke prohibition. However, in order to do that, they needed an alternative funding source because it wasn't going to go very far if you said, "Look, we're going to pass prohibition. We're going to try and get a constitutional amendment," and then the federal government's going to go broke because that's where the vast majority of the income is from, the revenue. So what they did is they came up with this graduated income tax, which, by the way, is one of the planks of the Communist Party. They came up with this graduated income tax, and it probably would not have passed, except for most of the supporters of prohibition were women who attended Christian churches. And of course, as you know, back in the early 20th century, Christianity and churches were a very powerful political force. So these women rallied so that they could invoke prohibition. They rallied around the income tax. And if it hadn't been for their support, the income tax probably would have never passed. But it did. And so the income tax passed. Several years later, they were successful in prohibition, and here we are today. I should point out, by the way, that the pitch way back in the day, because we hear it even today, the pitch was this tax will only hit the top couple percent of earners, right? And so what do we hear today? We hear, well, the top couple percent of earners, they should be paying the vast majority of the revenues that the government brings in concerning income tax. I will simply say at this point that the property rights of somebody, I don't know, who's the guy who owns Amazon?
Jeff Bezos. Yeah.
Thank you. The property rights of Jeff Bezos are just as secure, because he's a billionaire, as my property rights, your property rights, and the property rights of the people who are listening to you right now. Okay? So, and income tax really is an offense to property rights if it worked the way probably 95% of the American public believes it works, and their belief is false.
You haven't filed in 30 years. That is unbelievably, I'll tell you, that's impressive as all hell. It gives us some kind of hope. I got so many damn questions, Dave, because we know how this corrupt Department of Justice is. What happens the day where they make up some bullshit charges on you, then go ahead and arrest you for that stuff, and then also other Americans are now too afraid. Dave Champion doesn't file for 3 decades. And now we know, like, the front line, right? Everybody wants to talk all tough, but nobody wants to run the front line. You did. You just did. I don't think there's another precedence you could set outside of that. So why are more people not listening to you and going, well, shit, he's proven it works. Let's just not do it. Why do people not follow your proven example? Is it they're addicted and they need and they depend on their tax return as a part of their income? Or what's the mindset behind not paying income tax? Because you're an entrepreneur, I'm an entrepreneur. The people who get their taxes taken out of their paycheck, is that what they're hooked on for the year because they're going to get that back? Or I can't follow the logic for why more people wouldn't do what you're doing.
Okay, well, first of all, there are sheep. So, and that's a huge percentage. So I don't even know if we can really talk about them. They're going to do whatever the government says, no matter what it is. I mean, look back at 2020, 2021, and 2022. They're just sheep. So we almost have to take those people and take them out of the discussion, because no truth is ever going to reach that kind of person. So having said that, I do want to make a statement that in the 14 years that Income Tax Shattering the Myths has been out, literally with the information that's in Income Tax Shattering the Myths, hundreds of thousands of Americans have safely and with zero problems walked away from the government's income tax scam. So I want to say, and that's growing, by the way. It's much more robust than it was back in the day. Now, the other thing is fear. And I don't know how you feel about this, Dom, but to me, if there's an unknown out there and it's causing, I'm not really a fear-based guy, so I'm going to say concern for me personally. Mm-hmm. If I don't know something in my ignorance, which is not an insult, right? If you're ignorant, just means you don't have the knowledge. If I have a concern because of my ignorance, I'm going to go out and get myself educated so that either I know my concern was valid or I know I don't need to be concerned anymore. But I'm going to do that through facts, data, and evidence, what I mentioned at the top of the show. So what people do is they read Income Tax Shattering the Myths. And I'm going to guess probably 9 out of 10 people, the minute they open page 1 and they begin to read, what's in the back of their head is, I'm confident when I get through with this, I'm not going to believe it's valid. Okay, but just on the outside chance it is, I'm going to read it. And then they get to the very last page and they close it. And I hear this from readers all the time, so this isn't just me saying it, it's them saying it, and I'm sharing it with you. When they get to that final page and they close the book, they think, holy shit. Everything Champion said, or everything my buddy said to me when he told me I have to read this book, it's true and then some. Only at that point, then, does the average American who has these concerns, only then can they decide, now, what would I like to do about this? Now that I know that Congress has not imposed the income tax on ordinary, hardworking Americans, but the whole nation has been scammed by a 60-year massive and highly successful government disinformation campaign. So understanding, I'm speaking on behalf of just the average Joe, understanding that I've been brainwashed by government propaganda, and I've read this book, and the information that's there is incontrovertible, and there's mountains of it. And there's a part in the book where I actually present the government's arguments, and then I refresh people's memory of what they just went through as they went through the book, so that they can see the government actually has no game. They play word games to try and fool people, but when you know the law, their game collapses. And so what happens is they close that final page and they know, balls to bone, that Congress has never imposed the income tax on the ordinary, hardworking American. So because of that absolute confidence that they have at the end of Income Tax Shattering the Myths, they then get to make a choice. There are people who are just go along to get along. So they'll say, yeah, I know it's true. I know Champion's right. I know all these, hundreds of thousands of people who've left the system. That's good. So, they're not really who I am. Or they can say, you know what? The government has been stealing from me through this disinformation campaign and brainwashing for decades. And however much of my life I have left, whether it's a year or several more decades on this planet, I'm not going to keep allowing them to victimize me now that I know the truth and now that I know how to exit. So, but it is growing. The book came out in 2010, and I can tell you today that more people know than ever before, and I couldn't be more thrilled. And that's why I wrote the book, by the way. Yeah, just like everything else I've done in my life, as far as Army Ranger and law enforcement, where I perceived, even if wrongly, I was doing my community a service. That's why I wrote Income Tax Shattering the Myths, because the American people are the victim of the largest financial crime in the history of the world. And there was no comprehensive compendium that would absolutely button every single question down with mountains of hard, incontrovertible evidence. And I realized that was missing. So I said, well, if not me, who? So it's been out there 14 years, and I couldn't be more thrilled.
Yeah, while you were talking, I had the screen split. I just purchased a copy on Amazon, and you published it on my birthday, March 15th, 14 years ago.
Oh, right.
How did you, what was the cat? Somebody, Scott Sieverts, who hosts another show on our the Burn Pit podcast, called me a Renaissance man, and I had heard the term before, and I never really knew what it was until he explained it to me. You are, beyond a doubt, a Renaissance man. Look at everything that you do and that you've done. And one of the biggest things that impressed me during the social media climate is you constantly reinvent yourself. In this area, how do you go from Army Ranger to law enforcement to taxes? What was the calling that, I mean, a guy like you're fit, you're active, you've got a background in combatives, you lift weights, you work out. When did you just decide, man, I'm just as brain based as I am brawn, and then decide to put in that? What was the catalyst that made you so much passion behind the tax game here?
Well, as we just discussed a moment ago, the reason I went into the Rangers and the reason I went into law enforcement was to serve. And I considered myself in that day to be a very patriotic American. And, patriotic is a word that has a whole lot of different meanings to different people. For me, it meant standing up for personal liberty, standing up for small government, standing up for limited government, standing up for low taxes, standing up to the rule of law applies to everybody and so forth. So I had this, one might say, looking at America today, I had this fantasy version of what I was standing up for. And of course, we know that most of that isn't actually what's going on. It hasn't been for a very long time. Nevertheless, that was my paradigm. So I got a letter from the IRS. I owned a couple of different businesses, and I got a letter from the IRS. And so I would hand it off to my accountant. I didn't want to know anything about the government. I didn't want to know anything about IRS. I didn't want to know about taxes. So I handed it to my accountant. Here, handle this. Well, I gave him a couple. He dropped the ball. And all of a sudden, one day I walked into the bank, and one of the tellers starts crying when I get to the window. She's like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry, Dave. I had to do it." Do what? Said, "I just gave $32,000 out of your payroll account to the IRS." Well, that was a wake-up call, especially because, the men who were waiting for their paychecks, I had to go find $32,000 to honor my commitment to them and their faith in me that if they went to work, they'd get paid. So that was a huge deal. And I'm sure you can relate to this. Having been in law enforcement, there was this thing that's like, okay, so this hasn't gone to court. There's no probable cause. No court, civil or criminal, has determined that I owe anybody anything. And yet they took $32,000 of my property. And when I looked into it, I found that they did that by simply taking a document out of their desk drawer, filling it out, signing it, taking it down the hallway to their supervisor, having the supervisor sign it, and put it in the mail to the bank. Voila! That was all it took to take $32,000 of my property. And back in late 1992 or early 1993, $32,000 was a lot of money, right? So I realized something was amiss. And a couple nights later, I was at dinner with some buddies of mine, and I was telling them my tale of woe. And they started laughing. And I was like, "Guys, not really sure this is a laughable moment." And they said, "If you knew what we knew, you'd be laughing too." I was like, bring it on. If there's something to make this humorous rather than painful, I'm all about it. So they gave me a brief outline. They recommended 2 books to me, and they said, and we're going to stop there because we've told so many people and nobody wants to hear it. Nobody wants to do anything about it. So if you buy these books and you show an interest, we'll go further, but we're done for tonight. Okay. So the next day I got on the phone, because back in the day you had to call somebody and buy a book. You couldn't buy it online. There was no online. In a practical sense. So I ordered both the books and I got them, and I read them, and a dialogue began between me and these other gentlemen, and they introduced me to some other people. And I'll be honest, I mean, I was not committed. I said, I'm going to investigate this because something isn't right. I don't know what it is, but something's not right. No government should be able to take $32,000 of my money because some functionary says so. So I started doing the research, and over about a period of a year, I realized that the broad outlines of what they were telling me was true, and that there was a serious problem with the characterizations made by the government and the perceptions held by the citizens, and neither were accurate to what the law said. And so there was 17 years of in-depth research. I was very, very fortunate to own a business where I had other people who were carrying a lot of the load for me, so I could spend my time researching. And 17 years after these gentlemen told me at dinner the truth, I published Income Tax Shattering the Myths, because I realized if people had to go through what I went through to learn the truth, nobody would. I mean, who's going to do 17 years of research, right? So I decided something that somebody could just grab in their hands, read through it, and when they're done, they have the entire picture laid before them. They can do whatever they think is right. That was missing. And so that was my impetus for writing Income Tax Shattering. By the way, I started and stopped writing Income Tax Shattering. There's probably 6 different occasions. And the reason is I had set the bar for myself that unless I could sit down across a table with a camera present, and any attorney that works for the Department of Justice Tax Division could start arguing to me about their perception of income tax, that the standard for me to ask somebody to give me money to buy this book to tell them the truth, the standard was I had to dispatch every comer the DOJ could bring. I needed to be able to slap 100% of them down thoroughly. And until I was absolutely confident of that, knew it in my bones, I could not in good conscience ask anybody to pay me to get the facts.
Integrity is something that's really important to you, and you get that across in all your messages. And I kind of want to ask an interesting question for your mindset. Here you are serving our military. You go into a profession where I have no doubt that you know exactly what the law is. Sadly, you get so many people out there who I have no faith in today's generation of law enforcement. When you're talking about, the IRS just coming in and taking your property, it was putting me back in the days of how easy it was to go grab the guy's brand new Escalade just because you found a gram of coke in his back seat and you could articulate, oh, well, it was used for distributing because the way it was packaged. And we all of a sudden now we got a brand new car in the fleet, and how easy it was to do that without any court procedures whatsoever. I was part of the problem in that. When it happened to you, for lack of a better phrase, were you heartbroken knowing that you served your country in the military, you served your people, you didn't violate civil rights, and all of a sudden this happened to you? Did you go from being a patriot to, the fuck am I being a part of here? How was your heart and your mindset when you saw what the government you served as a patriot did to you?
Are you talking about the $32,000 or when I left law enforcement?
With the $32,000, or unless there was something different, because when you and I first started talking years ago, I was a step and fetch idealist. There was nothing anybody could tell me about how law enforcement was. And then in 2020, it was a little bit after, the first catalyst was the election process and seeing how cops are just so ridiculous. And then seeing what they did during the pandemic was just abysmal, and I have no faith in it again. But if here's you, this man of this integrity who serves in the military, serves as law enforcement, you retire, you start businesses, the government comes along, and it's you. You've done everything the way you were supposed to do it for God knows how long, and they take your property without any proper investigation. Did that make you feel like you had wasted your life serving our country, serving our people as cops? Did it make you disheartened? Because you said you were a patriot. How did that make you feel knowing they could do it to somebody who gave their all to our nation?
Perhaps not the way most people would think. I was loyal, and still am, to the ideals. And what I learned through multiple events over decades was that most of the people that I perceived should be also loyal to those ideals are not. And so really, when they took that money, and I didn't know what to think at that point. I mean, maybe they were legit and I screwed up somehow, right? But then the investigation occurred. Then I started learning. When I realized that the United States government Congress has never imposed the income tax on hardworking Americans, and they had absolutely no legal right, not questionable as far as debating it, legally, concrete legality, they had no right to take that money. My thought was, this cannot continue. If there were people I considered adversaries in my earlier years, in the military, on the street, I considered my adversaries. Once I realized what those gentlemen had shared with me, that the large framework was accurate, willful government conduct and willful corruption became my adversary instantly. Boom. As soon as I realized it was true, okay, I got something for you motherfuckers. And, by sharing the law with people through income tax shelter and other venues, through sharing the law with people, I can't even imagine how many hundreds of millions of dollars I have cost the government. And it's not me doing it. It's me saying, here, look at this, and then do what you think is right based on the law. Okay. And so what's happened is the government's had its propaganda and its disinformation ripped away like a curtain. And so when people see that with their own eyes, they read the book, many of them, not all of them, many of them walk away, never file, and never pay ever again. So I take solace from the fact that by doing the right thing, in this case, others are doing the right thing. And the people who are doing the wrong thing, I just wish more, they say about 100 million people file 1040s every year. And of course, an untold number file 1120s for their businesses. I'm going to do a quick story. When I was writing Income Tax Shelter in the Mist, I was still naive about my fellow man. And I thought, you know what? Not only does America need this book, because it is the only comprehensive compendium in existence on the subject. I said, not only does America need that so that Americans can be informed and make good decisions for the country, their role in the country they live in, where we supposedly believe in liberty. Not only that, but man, 100 million people file 1040. That means my potential buyer pool is 100 million people, right? So I was like, you know what? Once this comprehensive compendium exists, man, Americans are they're going to flock to it. It's going to be crazy. Not only am I going to set a country free from the largest financial crime in the history of the world, but in the process, I'm going to do pretty damn well. Okay. And that was totally naive because we talked about the sheep, and most Americans are sheep. So that nowhere near the number of Americans that I imagine would say, oh, hell yeah, give me that book because I want to know the truth and I want to stop being stolen from. Nowhere near the number that I imagine showed any interest in it.
I kind of want to go a couple different directions because we haven't talked in years. Pandemic came, you were outspoken about that. The election came, you were outspoken
about that. And got
the
platform for it, by the way.
Yeah, you did. It was amazing. It just blows me away that you're not even allowed. Well, let's start there. What's your view on the freedom of speech issue with social media platforms? Are you somebody that thinks that, hey, we should have that right, or are social media, there are companies, private entities that, they can censor what we say? Or did you ever take on that issue and kind of struggle with that as well too?
I gave it some thought. How's that? I don't know if I struggled with it. And where I came to is this. First of all, as we now know, the federal government paid Twitter and YouTube and Facebook hundreds of millions of dollars to do the government's bidding. So, and the cover story was, we're just reimbursing their costs. Really? So you're reimbursing the cost of, as an example, you're reimbursing Twitter its costs for enforcing its own policies? Really? No. These were bribes painted as legitimate payments. And hundreds of millions of dollars went into the pockets of Google and went into the pockets of Facebook and Twitter. So to me, when the government is bribing these private companies, it's a government offense. And the government's not allowed to censor. And they can dress, they can put a dress on the pig, but it's still a pig, right? And of course, there's some lawsuits working their way through the system right now as we speak. We'll see how those end up. One of the things that I would like to see happen is, because we no longer have a town square, right? There's no place that you can go get on a stump of a tree that was cut down and jump up there and say, hear ye, and speak to 50 or 60 of your countrymen. That place doesn't exist. The town square is long gone. And the town square at the time of the founding generation, that was where political messages got delivered. That and on handbills, the printed handbills. So to me, social media is the 21st century town square. As such, I believe that Congress should pass legislation which makes any social media company with the number of account holders over a certain level a public utility. As a regulated public utility, those companies would have to meet the same standard of free speech as the government does when it interacts with people. Okay? And the Supreme Court has spoken very plainly to the government's boundaries about interfering in free speech. They're essentially non-existent, with a few tiny exceptions for public safety. So what would happen would be, people like Mark Zuckerberg and I forget the name of the gentleman who was in charge of Twitter at the time. They would not be able to decide, well, there's this thing going on. It's a crisis. Let's stop Americans from saying what they want to say. And more objectionably, let's stop Americans from saying the truth, because the establishment is telling a lie. Okay. And we want to support the establishment lie, which means we need to quash truth. Here's an example. I did a video that appeared on Facebook, I don't know how many months ago, perhaps almost a year ago. I talked about a German study that found these long, white, fibrous, they call them clots, but they're really not clots. Long, white, fibrous substances inside the veins of people who had been vaccinated and had died suddenly. This was a study in Germany. So I simply read the study on the air. I took some parts that were scientific and I translated those into plain English. But other than that, I just read the study on the air. And then I talked about what I imagine should be the political solution to that, which was, now that we know what corners should be looking for, voters in counties across the country should be letting their commissioners or supervisors, whatever they call them in their jurisdiction, letting them know that we expect them to put pressure on the corner to start performing autopsies on these sudden deaths of people, young people that ordinarily would be subject to a medical examination, right, in the coroner's office, because that wasn't happening. 22-year-old people were walking down the street and dropping dead, and the coroner would just say, well, deaths happen. Yeah. So I put that video up, and I took a 30-day suspension from Facebook for that. And all I did was read the results of a study and then say what I think American voters should do, which is let their elected representatives know to put pressure on the coroners to do their job rather than not doing their job, right? And I read what the accepted definition of a coroner is, what they're expected to do by law and so forth. And I pointed out they weren't doing it. And it's completely appropriate for the county commissioners to pressure them, to put whatever pressure is necessary on them to get them to do their job. And Facebook suspended me. So this is the kind of thing I'm talking about. These companies they are suppressing truth for the purpose of preserving and supporting lies. So, yeah, I consider that a huge problem. Put it this way: if the balloon ever went up and revolution was here, there's some people who would be on the list.
I always wondered.
As an American, I just can't tolerate that shit.
Here's a thought I have every now and then, and I don't really say it because it's not fully formed. But with the advent of social media and individuals' truths being subjective, and then the size of their following, then converting it into the gospel truth, are we at a point where too much free speech is harmful? Meaning, I could be millions of followers, and I could take one sliver of Dave Champion's life, and I could misrepresent that, and my entire following base all of a sudden believes it. And then, Dave's lawyers come up and say, no, that's not true. I print the smallest retraction that nobody ever reads. It perpetuates. Now, all of a sudden, Dave's got people outside his house protesting, coming to his businesses. He's doxxed. That type of hive-minded sheep behavior that we're seeing this for the first time in history, that I've never seen this before. Is that a product of, I don't know how else to say this, too much free speech? How do we regulate that if we're going to be accountable for what they did to censor the truth?
I think the best way I can respond to that is just to open with liberty is a messy business. It has been since I've been young. There's so many things in my lifetime. I think that civil liberties that people have abused. Okay? I mean, a couple of years ago, there was a big movement. Some guys were attempting to take over some county libertarian party, the senior positions. And their purpose was they wanted to use the libertarian doctrine of, that at least in theory, Americans should have maximum freedom, right? And what their true agenda was, they were actually skinheads. They'd grown their hair out and they'd covered their tattoos. And their true agenda was they wanted to repeal civil rights laws so that we could go back to the 1940s. We could tell Black Americans, you can't drink from that drinking fountain, get the fuck out of our school, and so forth. Okay? They were racists who wanted to take America back there, but they weren't willing to say that, so they were using this libertarian argument that things like civil rights laws are anti-freedom. Okay? I don't know many people. I mean, yeah, I've heard intellectual debate on it, but I don't know many people who actually believe that, a crowd of people should be able to grab a black guy and string him up because somebody claimed he did this or such, which was commonplace back in the day. I don't know very many people who believe that black people should not be able to go to the same schools as white people, receive the same education, use the same bathrooms and drinking fountains. But yet that's what these people were about. So I share that to make the point that they were using the notion, the ideal of liberty, to bring in hatred and ugliness and disgustingness. So when we talk about free speech, and is there too much free speech? To me, the answer to errant speech, errant facts, things that are not true, is competitive speech. Does that mean the person who's telling the truth is going to win the day? It does not. People all the time gripe about government. We know this, right? And sometimes I tell people, government is occupied by humans, and humans are flawed. So how do you construct a system, fill it with flawed people, and then expect the system not to be flawed? Okay? And that's how I see this free speech issue. The reason I focus on facts, data, and evidence so much, Dom, is when I speak, I don't want to be the guy you're describing. Mm-hmm. I want to be the person who can stand up in front of thousands or tens of thousands of people and say, let me show you, let me prove it to you. I'm not interested in rhetoric. I'm reading a book from 1895 called The Crowd. And it talks about how potentates have manipulated the crowds into doing their bidding for centuries. And it's an absolutely fascinating book. And I find it fascinating because it's about human nature. But for me, other than learning about that mindset, it's worthless to me because I don't want to manipulate anybody. which is what, as you know, a lot of media people do, a lot of politicians do, a lot of entertainment people do, and commentators. It's all about manipulation. It's all about emotion. It's all about making you feel right. You know, even if you're 100% wrong, people love to feel that they're right, and their media man god says, you know what, you're right. You've been right all along. Even if they're 100% wrong, they want to hear that. Yeah. I don't want to be that guy. Never wanted to be that guy. And so for me, I just want to do the facts, data, and evidence. And if people want to reject that for whatever their human foibles are, that's humanity. It's messy. And I don't want to fix that by telling the other guy he can't talk.
Respect. Your opening statement made so much sense. Liberty is messy. So it's 100% accurate. Politics. You know, we're coming up into another election year. Are you shaking your head at our system? Are you like hands up in the air going, you fought so vehemently 2016 to put out information, 2020 to put out information. I can't expect that Dave Champion is going to be screaming at the wall again in 2024, wasting his breath on these two candidates. Are you just kind of like done?
I think where I'm at today, because I've learned that, you know, if somebody's a Democrat or somebody's a Republican or somebody's a MAGA person, that's a real emotional issue. And so because I do facts, data, and evidence, not emotion, there's not a lot that I can say that's going to sway them. You are one of the few Americans I know that you can hear something that rubs you the wrong way, and you'll sit with it until you know what you want to do about that. Most Americans will dismiss something that doesn't sit well with them, and you're the exception. Thank you. You're an example. So where I'm at now as we're going into 2024 is, I have to say, what the fuck is the problem with our political system that we have two fucking fossils that both of them are in cognitive decline? Okay. Joe Biden has showed that a number of times. Donald Trump has started exhibiting that quite clearly here in the last handful of weeks. They're both in cognitive decline. They're both, I mean, where are the Americans that could serve in the White House that are 50, 53, 58? I mean, why are we turning to people who, old, frail men? Why are we doing that? And we're talking about people who have their fingers on the fucking nuclear button, right? And I am appalled that anybody in this country is like, oh yeah, give me some Joe Biden, or oh yeah, give me some Donald Trump. Like, what the fuck is wrong with you? You know, we had some options in the Republican primary. They might not have been sterling, but in my opinion, they're better than putting people into as the chief executive of the executive branch of the United States government who's in cognitive decline. Ronald Reagan, we now know that during his last year in office, he was suffering from dementia, and the unelected staff was essentially running the office of the president. Because the president didn't have, as the year progressed, he had fewer and fewer good days. We didn't elect those people. So, and that was at the end of his term. These guys, they're going to get, if whichever one wins, if either of them is still running, they're going to get elected in mid-January. They're going to get sworn in mid-January of 2025. And they're just starting their 4 years, and they're already in cognitive decline. What are we doing? And why are we doing it?
Are we setting ourselves up for that type of system? Because here's the one thing that I've noticed. Because I was a kid. I remember the news made fun of Reagan every chance they got when I was a kid. So my association with him was he was a doddering old fool. It was 1980. I was 5-6 years old then. So when it comes to now, if Americans are accepting Joe Biden's got a staff that handles everything, they post on his Twitter, they do all that. Are we ushering in a system of now, like a round table of people are running the country instead of one man? The reason I ask this is because when you look at the MAGA crowd, who I don't know what they're thinking. They became the Trump derangement people of 2016 in this last 6-7 months, where they turned on, if you're Team DeSantis, you're immediately a traitor to the country and a shill. Oh, your team so-and-so, they are just they're the ravaged, savage animals that are step and fetch for Trump. Well, when 2024 comes and goes, and he does or doesn't get elected, whatever the case is, we have 4 years after that. Then what? Who's going to be their guy? Because Trump hasn't appointed. They're going to be left holding the bag of, now what do we do? So are we kind of seeing that we're putting older men in place so that, yeah, we're gonna create a different system here? Because I have no fucking idea how we recover from the last several years going forward.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. If you had asked me, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 years ago, I would have said, politics, especially at the national level, it's got to get better because it can't get any worse. And I was wrong. It has gotten worse, significantly worse. So, for instance, I know that the guy who's positioning himself to be post-Trump, no matter how Trump ends up, whether he doesn't get elected or he gets elected and ends up leaving office, I know, for instance, Ted Cruz is positioning himself to take up that mantle. And the interesting thing is Ted Cruz, if you read his history and you read the things he's done in the legal arena, when he was serving in the Justice Department in the state of Texas, I mean, he's a smart man, right? But like so many politicians these days, they have to say incredibly stupid things in order to keep I'm going to call it their fan base, to keep their fan base engaged. They have to say things that are absolutely idiotic. And I think a lot of times, I mean, there are politicians out there who they themselves are idiotic. But you take a look at somebody like Ted Cruz, who absolutely is not. But so often I hear him speak and I'm like, why doesn't he just put on clown clothes? Okay. Because that's what he sounds like when he says things that are patently false, when it's patently emotionally manipulative. It's like, Ted, I've read your fucking history. I know how brilliant your intellect is. Stop it. But they can't stop it. Because if they stop it, somebody else will get elected at the next election. So who does that come down to? Who are they pandering to? It's the American people. And how do we fix that?
Well, they're turning it into entertainment.
To hear that answer.
Yeah, you're turning it into entertainment. We saw. I didn't watch the Super Bowl last night, but everything on my feed this morning is about Taylor Swift. And when you really, it's brilliant. It's okay. So we know that she's got billions of people who are millions and hundreds of millions in the United States who are going to be voters in the next several years of voting age. So it's turned into an entertainment system, and the bloodthirst with the MAGA conservatives is insane. I walked away from arbitrarily supporting Trump. I don't even know if I'm going to vote this election. Last election, I did vote because I listened to people that I respected and said, we need to show them if the election is rigged, the overwhelming numbers of votes, and I'm in Illinois, right? Chicago area. It's not going to matter, but I'm going to do it anyways. Okay, so I don't care what the school of thought is on that. They're now dumbing the election process down to who can we make laugh or cringe or giggle in their seats with what we say on a soundbite today. And our Congress is like that. Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, anybody else who's out there who is going for the shock and awe. It's not just on the left anymore, like with AOC. The right is playing this game. It's entertainment. And I don't see any hope for the next 10 years at all. I just don't.
It's hard to feel hopeful. It really is hard to feel positive about where we're going. And as I indicated a moment ago, I think the problem, I don't know how you felt about it, Don, but when I was young, adults, I'm saying when I was 12, 15, 16, adults weren't so wrapped up in I'm right. I have to be right. Everything I say is right. Everything I believe has to be put into effect in America, that we don't have two parties or multiple points of view. They weren't like that. I mean, I remember listening to adults talk about politics, and they accepted sometimes you get your way, sometimes you don't get your way. That's what happens in a country where people get to vote for their elected officials, and your representatives then cast their vote at the federal level and so forth. But today it's so weird to me. It's like, I believe this, and God damn it, there's only one fucking way for things to go. It's the way I fucking believe. When did that become America?
Sadly, Dave, it's when Trump got in office. That's when that started to happen. I voted for him, but that's what it was. Dave Champion, my God, I love it. I'm sorry for not having you on for so long. The book, again, Shattering the Myth. It's Income Tax Shattering the Myths by Dave Champion. Get it. I just purchased a copy during the show. I'm going to be reading that, and I'm going to make a commitment not to file. I'm going to publicly acknowledge that. It's as simple as that. Say again?
They should go to drreality.news, drreality.news for the book.
drreality.news, and go there. Dave, I appreciate your time. I love having you on. I always learn something. And my God, you're just fucking, I wish to God more people would listen to you. Guys, we have a busy week coming up. I got, who we got on tomorrow? I don't know. We got somebody. Mr. Holistic is coming on tomorrow. We haven't had him on in a while. Big week coming on, obviously. Scott Sieverts, Lola, and then Kayla from Flex Your Feminine is going to be on as well, too. Go have a great damn day. Go get that book from Dave Champion, drreality.net, you said? Oh.
drreality.news.
drreality.news. drreality.news. Have a great damn day, guys. Go help somebody. If you can't help them, just don't hurt them. See you guys tomorrow.